Hi, this is Rachel from the Dotting Center. In last week's video, I introduced to you my Mandala Shapes design collection. This is a set of 6 stencils that allows me finally to draw out complex shapes on objects and make new art. It has exploded my work. I will link to that video if you haven't seen it. We also voted on the next tutorial, and if you haven't voted, go ahead and get on that. But for today's video, as promised, we're going to be recreating this design from start to finish in our sketchbooks. So I am a painter. I'm not necessarily a illustrator. But I loved seeing the work of artists that illustrate mandalas in pen and ink, and I wanted to play. The only problem was I couldn't draw something symmetrical at all, and it was really bugging me. And so I made a stencil set with all of the standard shapes so that it could help me design from scratch. And so since then, it has opened up an entire world to me. I am now in love with my sketchbook. I love working in black and white. Using pens and markers it's something that is a completely different part of your brain. And for me, it is just stretching it in all the right ways. I'm able to be creative and try new things. And here's what I've been working on. Some of these are kind of in the beginning stages, but it is a completely different but still related form of art that I think is really fun. So I wanted to go ahead and share this one with you today. It's just a simple mandala. We're going to use paints, pens, and pencils. So you will need a sketchbook. This one is from Hobby Lobby. This is just their, house brand, the Master's Touch sketchbook, and it's just a general purpose paper. It's not super thick, so it's for pen and light paint, nothing too heavy. Like if you wanted to use, I have another sketchbook over here for my paintings, and this is a very thick paper, so it can handle paint. This is good for watercolor, it's good for acrylics, any kind of thick paint that you want. That's what you want to get. But for pen and ink, I think this is fine. I like to use a Lazy Susan. I got this one at Target for $3. You can find these at any houseware place in the kitchen section. The thing I like about this is it has a really smooth action. See how it's just quiet? It's nice. You can find ones that are wobbly, and then like cheap ones on Amazon that, just the sound of that, I just can't handle it. You will need a way to divide your paper or canvas, and I have all 3 different divider stencils that you could ever need. These work on flat as well as round surfaces. They come in a 510, 416, 312 divider. 3 different kinds, every kind of segment that you could ever possibly want. Or you could use a protractor, and that would also work, and a ruler. Then I'm going to show you how to use these shape stencils. These have changed my life, and I'll show you how they work in this tutorial. You'll also need paint, just black and white acrylic paint, fluid paint, because we are using a sketchbook. We want to make sure that our dots are flat. Then we're going to use a compass with just a regular pencil. I'm not using anything fancy. That's to draw our circles. I'm using a Pigma Micron in the size 08. That is this size. And one thing, you can go deep into pens, but really the only thing you really want to pay attention to is make sure you're getting archival ink. That's going to make sure that your pen isn't going to fade over time, and it's going to actually last, because If you use a cheap pen, they can fade to brown or some other yucky color. You want to make sure it's nice and black forever. And then use a stylus tool for your dots. I like the kind that have a big wide ball end on one side and then a finer tipped ball end on the other side. I'm also using a liner brush. That is just because I want to test out my skills. My sketchbook is kind of a place where I go to try new things and experiment, and I'm not great at using a liner brush, and I want to try and up my skills, so I am going to try this. And then this is kind of a splurge item, but this is a Knock Eraser by Tombow, and this just makes erasing all the pencil lines at the end really fun. It also is a nice fresh eraser. It's one of those, it's like that thing where it's like a pen, and it just makes erasing better. And also sometimes these pencils, I don't know if you found this, but this pencil eraser does not have a very good shelf life, and it can give you mixed results, but this just works every time. So that's what we're going to use. Let's get started. All right, so let's go ahead, open your sketchbook to a fresh new page, grab your Lazy Susan, and let's get into the first step, which is dividing this paper into sections. Now, each different divider will give you a different look for your mandala. It just depends on what you're looking for. I chose the 312 divider. And to find center on your paper, it's super easy. You just pay attention to the margins all along the outside edge of the stencil. And then using the stencil, you just want to trace each one of those lines, and that will give you your divisions. And each section is 30 degrees. And then once you have the lines drawn, you are ready to start designing. It's as simple as that. Now I'm going to start with a center circle. I think you can see why I enjoy the Lazy Susan right now. It makes circles super easy. So I decided to start with the petal shape. And as you can see, what you want to do is line up the two end points of your petal with two of the divider lines that you've already traced out. So you'll end up putting the point of that shape on the center divider line, and then the two end points on the two lines that are adjacent to that center line. So right now what I decided to do was get my compass and give me another circle so that I can have a circle where those petal shapes are touching the divider lines, because I have two examples of that. And now with each petal that I draw, I just line up the end points with that circle, line up that center point of the petal with the center divider line. And as you can see, it lines up, and then you sketch it out. And then you just do that with each segment of your divider until it completes that row. And that's the first row of your mandala. Then I chose the half circle, and I decided to connect the two petals with a half circle, just like that. So I have two reference points on each petal, and then I have a camera that is out of focus. I apologize. Okay, so now we're going to grab the green stencil. That's the leaf shape. And using the smallest shape on the stencil, we're going to line up that bridge, which is that little center section of the leaf. And you line up the bridge with the center divider line, and then the two end points, we're going to make sure that those connect with each of the shapes on either side at the same point. Hard to describe, but hopefully you can see it in this video. And we're using every other divider line to create a leaf, and that's where we're at. So here's a close-up of how the design process goes. So these are transparent shapes. So you can see the shape before you sketch it out, which is really handy. You can actually see it unfold right before you decide to commit to a shape, which is really handy and makes it a little bit more fun to design, as well as just make sure that your shapes are symmetrical and everything is going to be a nice framework to do all your creative stuff, which comes next. So for this final row, I decided to use just half of the second smallest sized ellipse. So you line this up just like you did all the other shapes, except you would line that half point line up to the leaves. And at this point, I decided to stop the design and just add 2 circles to finish the edge. And the sketch is complete. Now we're going to go in with pen and paint and go right over the top of the pencil design that we want to keep. I'm using the 0.8 size of my Pigma Micron pen. So this is the more bold point size. And what you want to do is just trace over those shapes. See, now it's a lot easier because you have that pencil line down and you can just trace over and complete those shapes. And now you have your framework with the outline of your mandala. Now, in order to draw the outside circles, I'm going to replace this pencil with that same pen. And it's just a simple little solution right here. This is one of those school compasses. I really don't need a fancy compass. I find this to be just fine for what I do. The point goes right in the center, which you've already marked, and then just get that pen right on the line. And then using your Lazy Susan, just carefully move the paper right underneath your pen, and it just makes the perfect circle. It's real satisfying, super fun. Draw the other circle, and now you have the outline for this whole thing. And then I'm going to outline the inside while I have that in my compass. And now you can get to designing. Okay, so all that prep work for me is really just set up for this part. This is where you go in and you can get creative, and you can not have to worry that anything is going to be not symmetrical, because you have your basically the bones of your mandala already in pen, ready to go. You can erase things, you can design on the fly, see what works best, what doesn't work, you can just erase. This is where all of the fun artistic stuff comes in. Really enjoy this process of, designing within a framework. That is what those shapes are all about. Now I'm going to come in. You don't see this very often, but I like to use paint in my sketchbook, and it totally works. It's like you could use a pen and fill that in, and that's fine. Or you could use paint. And for me, paint just it's quicker. It has a cool texture in the end. It's slightly raised, and it has this this neat feel to it. At first, I thought I was going to have the white borders around the edge, but then I decided just to fill that entire rounded petal shape in with the paint. And I used that same process for each one of that row's petals. So basically that is one big number 9 dot of paint, and then using the stylus tool to fill in the rest of that shape. You could choose to use a pen and do some line work in there, What I'm choosing to do is fill it with paint and then dot over the top of that with white paint. It's all, it's kind of achieving the same look in the end. It just depends on whether or not you want to use pens or paint. So this next petal has a series of different swooshes and teardrops, 5 different designy shapes in that last petal. And so this little shape is made by one big dot, and then you take your stylus tool and just drag the paint down into a teardrop shape. Now once you complete all the teardrops, take your stylus tool and draw a swoosh on either side. And then this is my paint wipe-offinator. It's just a sock. Keeps your tools clean, which is super handy. And then what I did was I took the smaller size of the stylus and did those smaller outer swooshes. What you'll find is that the paint acts a little different on the paper than it does on canvas or a stone. So it's going to absorb a lot quicker than it would on canvas. And so that's just something to get used to, but I still enjoy the shapes that paint and stylus tools make versus a pen. But you could absolutely do all of that with a pen. So I decided to use a pen on these inside petals. Just going over the pencil shapes that I made. And now for that outside leaf shape, we're just going to create some lines to make it look like a leaf. Now, one thing I noticed was that the pen ink was warmer than my black paint. The black paint had a little darker and cooler toned black. That doesn't really bother me, but if that was something that bothered you, you might want to match your paint color perfectly with your pen color. You can use your stencil to find the center point again, which is what I did here, just to help me place a center dot. Now I'm using the contrasting white on top of the black, following the same divider lines that I have in pencil. We want to make sure that that lines up with the divider of the flower, and then just filling in all of those dots around that center dot. And one thing I do with my sketchbook is I really cut myself some slack with the precision of things. I want this to be a place where I can just kind of relax into the process and not get all hung up on whether or not it's absolutely perfect. But we can still make mistakes and correct them, but I'm really kind of loose with this because I think that that's part of the fun of working in a sketchbook is you can maybe cut yourself some slack on the perfection and precision of things and instead work on more of the creative and design work. It's a fine line for me. I do definitely notice that if I am all tight and want things to be just perfect and everything to be absolutely, the best, I'm not so great in the creative side. I don't know if you find this, but there's like a trade-off that happens, isn't there, sometimes, where if you allow yourself to be 100% creative, you can kind of slack off on the precision, where if you are super precise, your creativity might suffer a little bit. That's just what I've found. I don't know if you find the same thing. If you can relate to that, let me know in the comments. Am I just a big old weirdo? I don't know. Probably. So here we are in this petal section, filling it in with kind of like a halftone pattern. I'm using the larger end of the stylus to make a graduated line down the center, then using the smaller end of the stylus to fill out that space on either side. Now we're going to use white in these round petals and just give it a nice dotted edge, starting in the center and then dotting out in an arc along the edge of that petal on top of the paint. Now for the outer circle, I have a choice to make. Do I use markers, do I use pens, or do I try, once again, to try and use this liner brush? I need practice. I'm not great at it, but I do need practice, and this is an excellent opportunity to get a good practice session in. Not only is this a line, but it's a curved line, and it's so hard. But I like the feeling of stretching my brain and doing things that are not comfortable, because that's the only way I'm going to get good at the stuff that is difficult. So, you could absolutely use a wide tip marker here or another pen, but I wanted to really stretch my skill set and try that liner brush. So you can see again how great it is to have a Lazy Susan underneath your work so that you can slightly adjust the angle. You can get good at one angle and just filling in all of the edges. And now what I'm going to do is use my stylus tool and just walk the dots out from each of the 4 points on this outer circle, just the compass point, north, south, east, west, on each of those points of the circle. And that's just going to finish that outside edge. Okay, so I allowed the paint to dry overnight, and now we're going to get to take that cute little fancy Tombow eraser and go over all of the pencil lines that we want to erase at the end. And here I am showing it off, all the things it can do. It's like a toy. It's so cute. So we're just going to go through and erase all of the pencil lines. One of the things about pencil erasers is that they can get gross. The pink ones, they just don't seem to have a good shelf life. But this eraser is white. It's going to stay nice and fresh inside that pen. You can get refills too. But yeah, it makes this part, at least for me, a lot more fun. So here it is, the finished piece, another page in our sketchbook, and finally I am able to draw the mandalas. So happy. For our next project, we will go with whatever you all chose. In the last video, you voted on either the mug, the Christmas ball, or the wood pebble. Which one was it? It's such a mystery. What will it be? Oh, I can hardly wait, but we're gonna have to. Until then, meet me over at the Dotting Center for all of your dot art supply needs. And until then, have an awesome day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.